In this video, I'll be making coreshot stick baits with one floating core, one sinking core, and one salted core. Then I'll test these in a tank so we can see the exact fall rates side by side. Now, let's go ahead and make our baits. Alright, before we go ahead and make our 3 different cores for our coreshot today, we're going to have to make our outside shells first. So we're just going to do a simple black and blue coreshot today. So let's get some plastic into the microwave and we'll get started. Alright, our plastic is all heated up. So for our shell color, the only thing I'm going to be adding is the royal blue 0.04 size flake. Just adding the flake alone is going to give it a little bit of a blue tint to it. So let's add a bunch of that. Alright, let's mix that up. There we go. See, it almost looks like it has a blue tint to it, but alright, so that is our outside shell. Let's inject this really quick and we'll get started with our core colors. Alright, here we go. Our mold should be all cooled off now, so let's see how these shells came out. All on one side there. Perfect. Those injected perfectly. Just make sure you are injecting quickly to start, and then make sure you're holding that pressure to make sure they all fill in nicely, but those look great there. There we go again, front. Just that clear shell with that blue glitter in there, but once you get that black core in there, you'll be able to see a little bit of that blue tint as well. So let's take our rods out really quick, and then we'll place these back into the mold. We'll get ready to make our core shots. All right, we've got our first cut for our core all ready to go. So the first core we're going to be doing is a floating core. So we're going to be using the white label Plastisol from Dead On Plastics for that. So let's go ahead and make it really quick. All right, again, we're just doing a simple black and blue core shot. So I'm just going to do a straight black core. So I'm just going to do a nice squeeze of that in there. Mix that up. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to inject this back into our mold for our core shot, and then I will meet you guys at the tank for a little test run. All right, our mold is all cooled off, so let's see how it turned out with the black core. Look at that. There we go. Beautiful. Show you guys up here. Very simple bait, but definitely looks really good. So again, this is with the floating core. So now that this is done, I'm going to cut these off, and then I'll meet you guys at the tank to see how it looks. So I ended up putting a hook through the middle of it so it falls nice and evenly for you guys. But as you can tell, it still has a nice slow fall rate to it, which is partly due to the weight of the hook and the outer shell, which is made from the sinking blend. All right, so that is what the sink rate looked like for the floating core. So now we're going to go ahead and see what it looks like with the sinking core. And then we'll end off with the salted core to see how that looks side by side. But I had a bunch of leftover black plastic using the sinking blend from Dead On Plastics. So I'm just going to melt this down, I'll inject our baits, and I'll meet you guys back at the tank. All right, here we go. Our next mold is all cooled off with the regular sinking core. All right, looking good there. There we go. Yeah, these are looking good as well. So let's bring these over to the tank and see how it looks. All right, here's the core shot with the sinking core. As you can see, it still has a nice slow fall rate to it, kind of similar to the floating core, but we will get a direct comparison later. All right, so that is what the sink rate looks like with the sinking core. So now we're going to go ahead and do the salted core. I'm going to be using the sinking blend still, but I'm going to add some fine salt from Loreworks, and I'm just going to do the traditional amount of a quarter cup of salt per cup of plastic, but I'm doing half a cup of plastic, so I'm just going to do half that. So let's go ahead and make it. All right, so we've got our cup all ready to go. So let's just add our black pigment really quick. There we go. All right, so now let's get ready to add our salt. Again, I've got a half cup, so I'm going to be adding an eighth of a cup of salt. All right. Now you're supposed to slowly stir this in as you're mixing it in. So there we go. All right, so that is all of it. So I'm going to heat this back up, vacuum it again, and then we're going to want to make sure that this is mixed really well before we inject this, because all that salt might sink to the bottom there. So let's go ahead and heat it back up. All right, here we go. Here is the core shot with the salted core. Let's see how it turned out. All right, looking pretty good. All right, these are looking good. So let's bring these over to the tank and see how they look. All right, and last up, we have the core shot with the salted core, and it definitely appears as though this one has the fastest sink rate out of all 3 core shots. So now that we've seen this one, let's get a direct comparison of all them. All right, so first up, we have the sinking core on the left and the floating core on the right. As you can see, that it definitely appears as though the sinking core is a little bit faster sink rate than the floating core. All right, and here we have the salted core on the right and the floating core on the left. And not shockingly, the salted core definitely has a faster sink rate, but honestly not quite as much as I thought it would. And last up, we have the salted core on the right and the sinking core on the left. And it definitely appears as though the salted core has a slightly faster sink rate. All right, so there we have it. Now you can see that by just changing the core of your core shot, you can totally change the sink rate. So as always, I hope you guys found this video very helpful. And if you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, as it really helps us out. And if you guys haven't already seen my video from last week where I made a PB&J core shot, and I also gave you guys a little bit more tips and tricks on just how to get a perfect core shot, then you guys can check that out right here.